The air in the kitchen was thick with the smell of burning sage and something else, something bitter and herbal. Ethan swallowed the lumpy pill his mentor had given him, grimacing as it scratched its way down his throat. Tasted like stale coffee grounds and despair. An hour later, nothing. 2 hours, still nothing. By the third hour, a strange, uncomfortable heat had begun to pool low in his gut. It wasn't a fever. It was a furnace, stoking itself from the inside out. He rushed to the bathroom, a sense of profound and urgent wrongness propelling him. When he emerged, pale and shaken, his mentor, Walter, was staring into the toilet bowl with a look of pure scientific bafflement. Walter murmured, his voice faint. The contents weren't normal. They shimmered with a faint, golden vapor. He declared that Ethan wasn't digesting the pill meant for a inconstitution. He was, in fact, manifesting the exact opposite. A surge of pure yang energy was cooking him from the inside. Panic tightened Ethan's chest. Walter, ever the pragmatic charlatan, snapped his fingers. He had a solution. He'd fetch a spirit from the crossroads, a being of balanced energy, to help Ethan regulate the excess. Before Ethan could protest, the old man vanished into the basement, the trapdoor slamming shut behind him. Ethan stumbled to the bathtub, turning the cold water on full. He submerged himself, but the water began to steam almost immediately. The heat was a living thing, coiling in his veins. He was dimly aware of a new presence in the steam-filled room before he saw it. A figure coalesced from the tendrils of mist. He was achingly beautiful. Pale skin seemed to drink the weak light, and his eyes held the cool depth of a forest pool. He wore simple, timeless clothes, a white shirt and dark trousers that might have been from any decade in the last century. A smile played on his lips, sharp and curious. Ethan's addled brain could only form one coherent thought. Walter worked fast. The spirit didn't speak. He simply watched, head tilted, as Ethan panted in the cooling water. When Ethan finally managed to croak out a question about experience, the spirit's smile widened. He understood the need perfectly. He'd been in the quiet places for a long, long time, he said. His voice a low hum that vibrated in the steam. A little warmth would be welcome. Ethan, he assessed with a glance, would do. 3 days blurred into a cycle of desperate relief and exhausting exertion. The spirit, whose name Ethan never thought to ask, was relentless. The yang energy would build, a painful pressure, and the spirit would bleed it off, leaving Ethan spent and trembling. On the morning of the third day, Ethan's body felt like overcooked pasta. He fumbled for his phone, fingers slipping on the screen. He texted Walter, his message a plea for fortifying tonics, complaining about the spirit's impossible stamina. The reply was instant. Confused emoji. The spirit Walter had contacted was busy with a spectral gathering upstate, a monthly event. He wouldn't arrive for another week. Ethan's blood, already too hot, seemed to freeze in his veins. His thumb hovered over the screen. If Walter hadn't sent him, then who was currently sleeping in his bed? The phone rang. Walter's voice was a tinny shriek of alarm. Had Ethan consorted with an unknown entity? Ethan confirmed it, his own voice flat with dread. Walter fell silent for a long moment. Then, with forced calm, he asked for a name. Maybe his contacts in the other circles could smooth things over, arrange a favorable reincarnation as a thank you. Ethan turned to the bed. The spirit was awake, watching him with those unsettlingly clear eyes. Ethan asked for his name. Silas, the spirit said. Silas Reed. Ethan repeated it into the phone. The silence on the other end was absolute, then became a sputter of choked disbelief. Walter stammered out a question, his tone suddenly formal and terrified. How many branches were in their tradition? Ethan, confused, recited the old catechism. 3 schools, 5 arts. And before that, Walter's voice was a whisper. The first foundation, Ethan said, the words feeling heavy on his tongue. The original master, the one all the fragmented lineages traced back to. A name from the oldest stories, half remembered. Something like Silas. The connection seemed to sever itself. When Ethan looked at his screen, Walter's contact was gone. Blocked. He was alone. Silas rose from the bed, the sheet falling away. He stretched, a motion both languid and powerful. He asked if the call was finished. Ethan managed a stiff nod, his mouth dry. Silas studied him. Which school do you belong to? Every instinct screamed to lie. But Walter had abandoned him. A petty, angry part of Ethan decided on truth. The Banishers. My teacher is Walter Boone. Silas's eyebrows lifted slightly. The Banishers, he repeated, a thread of dry amusement in his voice. How the mighty have dwindled. Ethan flinched. He ventured another question, his courage fraying. What was Silas, exactly? He felt like a spirit, but there was a solidity to him, a weight the dead didn't possess. Silas glanced at his own hand, flexing his fingers. He'd been among the departed for so long, he remarked, that he'd simply absorbed the ambience. When Ethan pressed, Silas gave a casual shrug. A few centuries ago, he'd made a wager with the gatekeeper of the thresholds. The loser had to spend time in quiet reflection. He hadn't lost. It took Ethan a full minute to parse the implication. The sheer, breathtaking audacity of it left him lightheaded. He'd tricked the guardian of the dead into solitude. No wonder he'd been stuck. Silas's gaze swept over the cramped apartment, the peeling paint, the second-hand furniture. His expression was unreadable. He repeated his earlier judgment. Dwindled indeed. He announced it was time to leave. He needed proper attire. Ethan, desperate to stay on his good side, offered his own clothes. Silas accepted with the air of a king accepting a paltry tribute. As Silas showered, Ethan's phone buzzed. Walter, from a new number, was begging. A client was demanding a house cleansing in the Hudson Valley. The advance was spent. If Ethan didn't handle it, there would be legal and otherworldly consequences. A second, ice-cold voice came on the line, identifying itself as a collector. The choice was simple: fulfill the contract or have a personal accounting. Ethan agreed immediately, his voice squeaking. The address came through. He stared at it, a knot of dread in his stomach. The location was nestled between two mountains owned by the most affluent of the three schools, the Guides. When Silas emerged, smelling of Ethan's cheap soap and looking unfairly regal in his sweats, Ethan explained the job. Silas frowned. A haunt troubling the foothills of the Guides' domain, and their own people couldn't manage it? It spoke of disgraceful negligence. He had decided they would visit the Guides directly. It was time to inspect what had become of his legacy. Ethan pointed out the job's location was directly en route. Silas considered this, then gave a curt nod. They would stop this nuisance first. The journey was a comedy of rural transit, ending with a bumpy ride in the client's ATV. The client, a nervous man reeking of grave dirt and fear, pointed to a looming Gothic revival mansion at the end of a weed-choked lane and refused to go further. The air around the property was still and thick. Silas observed a barrier, a ward meant to keep the living out. His first solution involved a gesture that crackled with ozone. Ethan lunged, grabbing his wrist. The raw power he'd summoned could level the hill. They needed a subtler approach. They went to the neighboring estate, a smaller, equally decrepit manor. The spirit who answered was a blustery, fearful thing. He recognized the name Silas Reed not with hostility, but with a kind of ancestral terror. He called him the Forebear. The spirit explained the situation in a rush. The valley was once a quiet retreat. The Guides had moved in and commercialized the afterlife. They compelled the local spirits to run messages, harass the living for profit, facilitate dark pacts. The spirit in the large mansion was the old landholder, a man of principle. He'd made a final bargain, sacrificing his chance to move on to erect an impenetrable ward against the Guides. They called him a squatter, a nuisance. The client was undoubtedly one of their lackeys, hoping outsiders would do their dirty work. Silas stood. His anger was a cold, palpable force. He instructed the cowering spirit to deliver a message. Within the hour, every wronged spirit in the valley was to gather at the guide's chapter house. Their leader would be providing a formal apology. The guide's headquarters was the obscenity of wealth, a marble and glass compound that screamed new money. A smug security guard tried to turn them away until Ethan produced his tattered banisher's card. They were admitted to a vast, echoing atrium. The chapter leader, a man dripping with gold jewelry, swaggered out surrounded by sycophants. He laughed at the notion of Silas's identity, summoning shadowy forms from the corners of the room. Silas didn't flinch. With a flick of his wrist, the attacking shades were caught, compressed, and woven into a whip of crackling darkness. The leader's laughter died. The whip snapped forward, not cutting flesh, but searing the very essence beneath. It was a punishment that transcended the physical. The gathered guides could only watch as their leader and his inner circle were flayed, their screams echoing in the opulent hall. The valley spirits arrived, a silent, grim congregation. Silas forced the broken leader to kneel and apologize to each one. When it was done, Silas unraveled the binding compulsions from every spirit present. Then he picked up the weeping leader, condensed him into a wailing sphere of light, and tossed it into the floor, which swallowed it without a trace. He would answer to the keepers of the threshold now. Silas faced the stunned assembly. The guides, he declared, were henceforth a sanctuary, not a syndicate. Their purpose was aid, not profit. Those who disagreed should leave. Many did, grumbling about wasted potential. One young apprentice, however, stepped forward, her eyes bright. She wanted to stay. She also shyly asked Ethan if he was single. "Leave," Silas said without looking at her. After appointing a new, wide-eyed leader from the remaining few, they prepared to depart. Silas made a series of extravagant demands of the new chapter head. A feast, resources, personal services. The new leader, an earnest college student, diligently typed it all into a tablet. He turned to Ethan, asking for his requests. Ethan, exhausted and operating on autopilot, mumbled something about always believing in heroes from the stars. The boy's eyes lit up. He launched into an enthusiastic debate about cosmic lore. The ride back was in a luxurious, silent car. The plush seats did nothing to soothe the fresh fire kindling in Ethan's core. The yang energy was returning, a tide of heat and restless power that made his skin itch. He groaned, doubling over. Silas glanced over. A slow, knowing smile touched his lips. He placed a cool hand on the back of Ethan's neck. Again, Silas asked, his voice a low murmur near Ethan's ear. Ethan could only nod, a wave of desperate resignation washing over him. "Don't worry," Silas said, his other hand finding Ethan's. His touch was like ice on a burn. "I'll take care of it."